Hey guys, tonight we begin with a soft, slow breath and a gentle thought that floats through the mind like rain against bamboo. Dim the lights if you want. Let your eyes rest. Because this is a story about a man who refused to stop fighting long after the world itself had grown tired and gone home. A soldier in the Pacific who carried duty like a ghost for almost 3 decades. His name was Hiroo Onoda, and he kept moving through the jungle long after the war had ended. Because nobody told him to stop, or maybe because he chose not to hear it. Hard to say when the trees are your only audience. He was born in Japan in the early 20th century, a country full of storms and steel. A nation that bowed deep to its emperor and marched forward with dreams larger than the map of the world. Young Hiroo grew up breathing discipline like morning frost. He trained. He learned. He sharpened the shape of duty as if it were a second spine. When war came, he simply stepped into it like a man putting on a coat. Of course he did. Everyone did back then. It was the tide, and Hiroo did not argue with tides. By 1944, he found himself sent to Lubang Island in the Philippines. An outpost that looked small and quiet from far away. But up close it held shadows. Palms swayed like tired sentries. Villagers moved like drifting lanterns between huts. The war was bleeding into its final act, though Hiroo did not know. Tokyo gave him orders. Hold the island. Do not die. Do not surrender. Fight until told otherwise. A simple command. Sharp as a blade. He tucked it behind his ribs like a secret he would never put down. The island fell to Allied forces soon after. Bombs whispered across trees. Uniforms changed hands. Signals faded into smoke. Many soldiers surrendered. Many left, but Hiroo stayed. He was trained in intelligence and guerrilla tactics. Stay hidden. Stay alive. Resist. It sounded almost poetic if you ignore the hunger and rain and insects. Hiroo listened to rustling leaves like they were messages from a distant emperor. He believed Japan would return. So he waited, and when weeks shifted into months, he waited more. He lived beneath a world of dripping branches and tall grass. Nights stretched long. Days were the same slow soup of heat and suspicion. He built lean shelters. He stole rice. Sometimes he took livestock. Sometimes he clashed with locals who did not understand why a lone soldier still crept through their fields. Hiroo believed they were enemy scouts. Spies. Terrible word. Heavy like a stone. He never thought the war was gone. He never believed the silence of aircraft meant peace. Instead, he thought it meant the world was holding its breath. Peace treaties bloomed in distant cities far beyond his jungle. Japan surrendered. Men returned home. Streets filled with relief and sorrow. But deep inside that green island, Hiroo sharpened his knife and thought of honor. The emperor was his anchor. Without an order to return, he felt chained to his duty like a tree rooted in soil. He refused leaflets dropped from planes. He thought they were tricks, paper lies drifting like tired moths. Even when his own family wrote to him, he studied the letters like riddles. Surely the Allies forged them. Surely the war still breathed. His companions dwindled over time. Men died. One by one they fell to disease or conflict or exhaustion. Hiroo buried memories like small seeds beneath wet soil. Only he remained. A single soldier against a world that no longer fought. Strange image, but there he stood. A ghost of a war that ended. He watched seasons turn soft and then sharp again. He heard radios in distant huts and believed them to be staged broadcasts. Clever illusions. Because why accept peace when war was simpler? War had rules, peace required letting go. Years spiraled. Still he wore his uniform. Still he cleaned his rifle. Still he greeted each sunrise like an enemy patrol. Villagers grew old while he stayed suspended like a bead of water on a leaf, refusing to fall. New generations heard tales of a silent figure in the woods. A man with eyes like rusted iron. He moved like wind. He vanished like fog. The myth felt older than the trees. Some feared him. Others pitied him. But none could persuade him to come down. 29 years slipped like sand through open fingers. 29 years of rain rot and memory. 29 years of waiting for an order that drifted somewhere between lost and forgotten. Imagine that level of faith, or stubbornness. Maybe they are the same shape under moonlight. Hiroo remained in duty even as the world built televisions, even as new wars came and went. Even as the Japan he remembered faded into history books. One day a traveler arrived on Lubang, not a soldier, not an officer. Just a curious young man who heard rumors that sounded like ghost stories. He wandered into the jungle with soft steps and open hands, searching for the last echo of a war he never lived through. The air felt heavy with old oaths. The leaves trembled as though history itself was about to sigh. And then there was movement ahead. A shadow. A breath. Right where we left off, a shadow emerged between the trees. Hiroo Onoda stepped forward slowly. His uniform faded like old parchment, his rifle steady. His posture tall despite decades of rain and hunger. He stared at the young traveler with eyes that carried 29 years of war. No trust, no fear, only duty. The traveler breathed carefully. He spoke softly. He said he wanted to understand. Not fight, not command. Just listen. The jungle held its breath like a monk in meditation. The traveler was Norio Suzuki, a peaceful soul who believed adventure could be its own religion. He had left Japan to find three things: a panda, a yeti, and one soldier still fighting a war no one remembered. Strange goals, almost poetic, but he found the last one. He found Hiroo, a living time capsule, a man whose heartbeat belonged to a past century. Suzuki looked at him like someone gazing at history made of flesh rather than paper. He spoke gently. He said the war was over, really over, long over, almost 3 decades over. Hiroo stared without blinking. Wind passed between them like a quiet messenger. Hiroo told him he would not surrender unless his commanding officer returned to give the order directly. Not a leaflet, not a rumor, not a stranger with hopeful eyes. He needed the voice who once told him to fight. War had shaped his bones. He could not leave without permission. He would rather remain in the dark than step into a world built without him. Suzuki nodded. He promised to come back with the officer, a promise that sounded impossible to most. But history loves strange persistence. Suzuki returned to Japan. He searched for Major Taniguchi, the man who once sent Hiroo into the jungle. Time had changed him into a quiet bookseller. Gray hair, soft voice, no uniform, no command. When Suzuki told him Hiroo still waited, Taniguchi felt the weight of years settle on his shoulders like wet stone. A soldier he had forgotten still lived under his order. Loyalty wrapped like ivy around a rusted fence. So the major agreed to return, not as a commander, but as a final echo of duty. Now imagine the scene. Lubang Island again. Damp air thick like slow breath after rain. A small clearing where vines hung like tired soldiers. Hiroo heard footsteps. Familiar footsteps. Something inside him recognized the rhythm. A piece of his mind that had slept for decades opened one eye. There stood Major Taniguchi wearing not a uniform but a simple civilian suit. Gray, plain, non-threatening. Hiroo stared at him like one might stare at a ghost. Taniguchi spoke with calm, steady words. He said the war ended. He said Japan surrendered. He said Hiroo had fulfilled his mission with honor and endurance beyond measure. And finally he gave the order Hiroo waited nearly 30 years to hear. Stand down. Return home. The jungle exhaled. History loosened its grip. Hiroo lowered his rifle like a man releasing 30 winters from his spine. He unbuckled his sword. The blade still shone bright as moon water, untouched by rust. A symbol of obedience and isolation. He handed it over with steady hands. Almost ceremonial, as if surrender was not defeat but transformation. He asked only one quiet question. Is the emperor still alive? They told him yes. Hiroo felt something break and heal at the same time. A lifetime of devotion had not been wasted. He was not abandoned. The world had moved on, yet his emperor remained. A single thread connecting him to everything he had endured. When Hiroo walked out of the jungle, the world stared back in awe. Cameras flashed like unfamiliar insects. Reporters followed like curious birds. He stepped into a world that sprinted while he stood still. Automobiles replaced horses. Televisions replaced radios. Skyscrapers replaced shrines. Tokyo looked like science fiction. He saw neon lights brighter than tropical sun. He sat in restaurants too clean to believe. He heard laughter that did not belong to war. He felt pavement under his feet after years of mud and roots. People called him loyal. Others called him tragic. Some called him stubborn enough to bend time itself. Maybe all are true. He fought for a country that no longer existed. He preserved an order long erased, yet he never betrayed his oath. He became a symbol of duty taken to the edge of obsession. A relic of an empire that lived only in museums and memory. But Japan had changed more than Hiroo could process. His story fascinated, but also unsettled. A reminder of devotion carried past reason. He tried building a new life. He wrote a book. He practiced agriculture. He even moved to Brazil for a time. Wide fields replaced tight jungle. Sunlight fell freely without suspicion. Yet part of him remained anchored in Lubang. Roots grown from discipline, not soil. Peace felt louder than gunfire. And silence held memories sharper than blade metal. Years passed. He visited the island again. This time not as a soldier, but a man seeking closure. He met villagers who survived his patrol years. Some forgave, some cried. Some bore scars seen only when hearts spoke. Hiroo listened. The weight of lost lives rested on him like night fog. He had believed he fought enemies. Instead he fought farmers, fishermen, fathers, sons. He apologized. Maybe the apology could not rewind time, but it could soften its echo. He lived long enough to see documentaries and interviews paint him as a legend. A man who fought until the calendar forgot him. A soldier who bowed to duty longer than most bow to love or comfort. Yet beneath the myth there was only a quiet man who waited for orders that never came. A man shaped by war then abandoned by it. A shadow walking across decades. One evening he stood beneath a modern skyline. Cars passed like shooting stars. Screens glowed like artificial moons. Hiroo blinked slowly. He inhaled city air without gunpowder or damp soil. He thought of bamboo forests and rustling foliage. He thought of nights spent listening to insects and expecting enemies. He thought of an order that kept him alive and trapped in the same moment for half a lifetime. Then he felt something shifting inside. Something uncertain. Something approaching like a slow step behind him. We continue from the last moment where something shifted behind him like a slow footstep in a world he no longer fully understood. Hiroo Onoda turned his head gently. His face calm like a pond untouched by wind. City lights spread around him like stars that learned to shine from glass instead of sky. People passed by without noticing him, their pace quick, their voices full of worlds he did not know. Yet he felt as if someone called his name not with sound but with memory. A reminder that even when war ends, history does not release its soldiers easily. It keeps them like pressed leaves between pages. Quiet. Preserved. Still breathing. He walked through a Tokyo street that felt unreal. Once he lived with mud under his feet. Now polished stone carried him forward. He watched electric doors slide open without touch. He saw food served in bright shops where no one watched the forest for ambush. He felt both small and enormous. Small because the world had grown without him. Enormous because only he carried 30 years of war inside his bones. He found it harder to sleep here, not because of fear, but because peace was loud in ways he could not name. Silence in the jungle was sharp like blade. Silence in a city was wide like sky. He tried building routine. He visited parks where trees did not hide soldiers. He read books printed long after surrender. He listened to music that did not belong to empire or battle. People asked questions, endless questions. How did you survive so long? What did you eat? Did you ever doubt? He answered slowly, each word like stepping stone across water. He spoke about survival as one speaks about breathing. It was not heroic. It was necessity. Duty held like rope. A rope that never frayed even when reality did. Hiroo accepted recognition with the same calm he once carried into the jungle. Awards, handshakes, photographs. None replaced the years he lost. None erased the lives taken under mistaken duty. Cameras painted him as legend. Yet when light faded, he sat alone with memory. He remembered footsteps through tall grass. He remembered believing every rustle was enemy movement. He remembered nights where moon hung like a watchful eye above leaves. He remembered hunger that felt like a slow animal chewing through his ribs. He remembered hope and doubt and loyalty beyond reason. Time moved forward, but Hiroo sometimes walked backward inside his mind. He saw his younger self standing guard while rain dripped like slow time. He saw his friend Kozuka shot years before surrender reached his ears. Kozuka died believing war lived on. Hiroo carried that weight silently, like stone tied to spirit. He visited Kozuka family after returning. He bowed low. A gesture of apology that wished to be enough. They received him with tears, not anger. Their son died to a war long finished. A war that Hiroo kept alive through loyalty that swallowed logic. Forgiveness felt like thread stitching old wounds, though scars remained like faded ink. Years later, Hiroo traveled. Brazil offered open land and new soil to work. He planted trees. He raised cattle. He lived under sun without suspicion. Yet even prosperity felt foreign. He wrote a book to place his memory in pages, so the world could understand a soldier who kept fighting beyond time. His voice remained calm, his words simple. He did not claim heroism. He claimed duty. A duty that built a cage around him until someone came with a key shaped like truth. Still, he wondered if surrender was liberation or loss. If stopping war meant leaving purpose behind like old uniform folded away in trunk. He aged slowly yet steadily. Wrinkles like map lines across his face, hair silver like moonlight on steel. But his posture never fully softened. Discipline lived in his spine. He trained youth in wilderness survival. He taught them patience like river, endurance like mountain, loyalty like oak that does not fall in wind. They admired him, though few could grasp the depth of his decades. They saw legend. He felt memory. A difference quiet but deep. One night he sat beneath a pine tree. Needles fell softly like remembered rain. A breeze whispered through branches, sounding almost like voices he once followed in battle. He closed his eyes. He felt the jungle inside him. Still alive. Still breathing. Still shadowed by duty. He thought of leaflets that once fell from planes telling him war was over. He ignored them then. He considered the possibility now that truth often arrives quietly. Not with trumpet. Not with command. It arrives like wind touching old wounds. Hiroo returned again to the Philippines as gesture of peace. He walked the same forest trails where he once moved like a ghost with rifle raised. Now he walked unarmed. Villagers met him, some with hesitation, some with acceptance. Some with eyes carrying memory of fathers lost or gardens burned during his years of resistance. He bowed deeply to them as if the earth itself needed apology. He helped build schools. He planted trees where conflict once grew. He carried remorse like gently held flame. Never hidden, never burning out. In his later years he spoke to students. Young minds shaped by peace, not empire. He told them war demands obedience, but peace demands understanding. He said loyalty without question becomes blindness. He did not speak with bitterness. He spoke like a man who walked too far into yesterday and returned with stories instead of anger. Students listened with stillness, some with awe, some with quiet sadness. Life moved like tide, slow, relentless, soft around edges. Yet one question still followed him through nights like a distant lantern. Did he waste his life or fulfill it? He could not answer. Duty is not measured in victory, nor in surrender. It is measured in weight carried across time. One evening near the end of his life, Hiroo stood before a mirror. His reflection did not show a soldier, nor a hero, nor a relic. It showed a man who lived through two worlds. One built on war, one built on peace. He looked into his own eyes and felt movement behind him like that same slow step from years before. Something, someone, memory or truth, approaching. He stood before the mirror in his small quiet room. The reflection watched back like an old companion that never left. Tokyo outside sounded like wind made of engines and voices. Yet in his mind, the forest rustled again. A memory that did not age. Leaves whispered like footsteps. The mirror felt thin like a window into two worlds. One built of steel towers and neon glow. The other shaped by mud huts and ordered patrol. Hiroo breathed slow. The city air tasted unfamiliar. Soft. Clean. Maybe too clean for a man who lived decades with smoke of campfires and smell of damp soil. He blinked once, then twice. The reflection remained, but behind it he felt movement. A presence that waited to speak a truth he never asked to hear. Every morning, or what passed for morning in his quiet routine, he walked to a park. Children ran across grass, their laughter light like birds. Hiroo watched them with stillness. It amazed him how new generations lived without war carved into their bones. They did not scan trees for hidden rifles. They did not listen for rustle that meant danger. Their world flowed easy like river in summer. Hiroo sometimes envied them, sometimes feared for them. Peace makes people soft. War makes them stone. He wondered which shape was better, or if life should be something between. Crowds treated him like symbol. They bowed. They asked for stories. They wanted to touch a man who lived where history refused to end. Reporters wrote lines describing him as loyal beyond reason, obedient past logic, a living ghost of empire. Hiroo nodded politely to all, but inside he carried a knot that never untied. He served with devotion, yet service became cage. Years turned into decades like sand slipping through fingers that never opened. He thought of orders given in 1945, hold the island at any cost. Never surrender. Wait for command. He obeyed like perfect soldier. Now he wondered if perfection was curse. At night he read. He studied news and history that unfolded without him. He learned governments rose and fell. He learned new borders, new alliances, new wars fought for reasons that seemed distant from his old jungle purpose. He learned about technology that could speak across oceans and skies, radios tiny as fist, screens bright as dawn. Knowledge came like flood, yet within he still carried the slow rhythm of patrol through undergrowth, quiet steps, careful breath, ear tuned to pulse of danger that never arrived because war was already gone. He met students who asked about courage. He told them courage is not loud. It is quiet like a man waking every day to same mission without question. But he also warned that courage without thought is like blade without handle. It cuts both enemy and self. He spoke slowly, letting each word rest like leaf on water. Classrooms listened, some eyes wide, some sad. A few struggled to understand a life measured in loyalty rather than years. In Brazil he lived several seasons. The land wide like freedom, forest replaced by pasture and open field. Still he felt linked to Philippines as if vine tied to heart. He returned there to seek peace, though peace never felt like victory. He shook hands with families whose fathers or brothers died in his long war. Their eyes held pain and acceptance both. He bowed deeply. He planted trees in memory of those lost. Saplings reached upward like hope, slow, patient, unmoving yet always growing. One afternoon he walked through Manila on a visit arranged by old friends. Streets bright with vendors. Air warm, cars rolled past like slow tide. A young man approached him with hesitation. He carried an old photograph, faded paper, edges torn by time. It showed a man in uniform standing in jungle shadows. The young man said this was his grandfather, a villager killed during wartime years long after official surrender. Hiroo felt weight settle on his chest like stone. He bowed to the young man. Head lowered, a gesture without words. The young man did not accuse him, he only asked why. Hiroo answered with voice steady like cold stream, duty, misguided, unquestioned. He held position long after war died because he believed truth was enemy lie. He lived in world made of orders, not facts. The young man nodded and walked away, leaving photograph in Hiroo hands. The picture trembled slightly between fingers. Not from wind, from memory. Hiroo sometimes returned to that moment in mirror. The shadow behind reflection. Like someone waiting to speak. Some nights he stood there again. Light soft. House silent. He stared until his eyes blurred. In reflection he saw younger self crouched in bushes, rifle held steady, eyes sharp. Purpose clear. Behind that a second layer. Older Hiroo watching himself watching time. A hall of mirrors where war and peace overlapped like twilight sky. He reached a hand toward glass. Cold surface met warm skin. For a moment it felt like touching the past. Years passed like steady drum. Hiroo aged into quiet routine. Tea in morning. Walk in afternoon. Lessons to youth. Letters from historians seeking detail. He responded with simplicity. No grand speeches. No dramatic regret. Only truth spoken like plain rice. Nourishing but not sweet. He accepted medals though he hung them in drawer rather than wall. Glory felt empty when weighed against decades lost beneath canopy of vines and rain. One evening he visited a museum that displayed artifacts of war. Glass cases held rusted helmets, worn boots, maps with faded ink. His own rifle rested behind one pane, preserved, locked away from touch. He stared long at it. A tool once held like extension of arm, now silent. It no longer killed nor defended, it only remembered. People walked past whispering. That is the rifle carried by the soldier who never surrendered. Hiroo felt both seen and misunderstood. Another case held his uniform. Fabric thin. Color washed by sun and soil. He recalled every stitch sewn and resewn during long years. He remembered rain soaking through. He remembered blood of hunted animals staining sleeves. He remembered threading needle by moonlight. Now uniform laid flat under glass, fragile like butterfly wing. He wondered which version of himself belonged there. The soldier, the survivor, the man who eventually laid weapon down. Night became deep, museum lights dimmed. Hiroo remained standing before display. Shadows shifted across room like memories moving through trees. Behind him again that faint presence. Familiar now, persistent. He knew it was not ghost nor person. It was understanding, slowly approaching, taking shape at edge of thought. He inhaled steady, exhaled slow. Something finally stepped forward inside his mind. He stood in the museum with history pressed around him like fog. Silence wrapped every object like old breath. Hiroo lifted his gaze to the ceiling lights that glowed soft and pale like dawn in a clearing. His heart beat slow like soldiers' march. The presence inside his mind edged closer, not like ghost. More like truth finally stepping out of jungle that lived inside him. A truth that walked toward him the same way he once stalked patrol trails. Quiet. Patient. Certain. He shut his eyes. A wave of memory washed through him like rain across leaves. He could hear distant cicadas. He could smell earth of lubang. He could feel fabric of uniform against skin. Thin. Rough. Loyal. He left museum and walked through night. Streets of Tokyo. Neon signs flickered like fireflies. People passed him with steps soft like pages turning. Life here moved smooth without fear of ambush. Yet Hiroo's body still moved like soldier on watch, eyes scanning roof edges. Ears tuned for broken twig, habit born of 29 years. Hard to release, harder to forget. The world around him made money and music. His world once made silence and duty. Different but breathing on same ground. He wondered which world forgave men like him. Letters came daily, some praising, some cruel, some confused. Why did he stay? Why did he fight? Why did he not believe war was over? Hiroo answered few. Truth was simple. He followed orders and never received new ones. To him surrender, leaflets looked like tricks. Loudspeakers sounded like enemy deception. Newspapers dropped from skies seemed fake like stage play. Soldiers trained to distrust, so he distrusted. It was not madness, it was discipline sharpened too far. A blade forged so strong it cut time itself. He joined a school to teach survival. Students sat cross-legged before him, their eyes bright like steel in sunlight. He taught them how to track footprints on soil, how to build shelter from branches, how to find water by studying insects. He spoke without rush. Words spaced like steps on careful trail. Students listened in stillness. They admired man who lived alone with jungle for decades. He did not speak about death or villagers lost to his confusion. That part remained in chest like heavy stone. But he taught resilience. Endurance. The slow art of staying alive when world forgets you. Years later, he returned to Philippines again. This time not as soldier, but as old man walking into memory. Villagers welcomed him with kind respect, not fear, not hatred. They offered food and smiled gentle. He bowed low like bamboo in storm. In forest he stood where old camp once rested. Only moss and roots remained, trees grown tall over fire pits. Vines wrapped like soft ropes where rifles once leaned. He placed hand on trunk and whispered something only leaves could hear. Maybe apology, maybe farewell. Maybe thanks for keeping him alive when world moved without him. Night fell and he lit small fire. Flames danced like memories. Sparks rose like years he lost drifting upward into sky. He sat cross-legged and watched glow reflect on polished blade of his old knife. Steel untouched by time like piece of frozen war. He wondered how many lives shaped by orders spoken many decades ago. How many men still marched inside mines though feet rest on peaceful ground. He remembered last day before surrender. The officer who returned to jungle to find him. The surprise in face, the disbelief. The moment truth shattered war like glass. Hiroo felt past ripple through him again. He remembered young version of self crouched in tall grass. Rifle aimed at shadows that might hold enemy. Sweat on brow, heart firm like stone, mind set like iron gate. Then voice calling his name. A voice from country that still existed only in memory. He followed it with caution. Steps slow like wounded animal. At clearing, he found man in uniform clean and crisp. New world standing before old one. The man told him war ended long ago. Told him Japan surrendered. Told him he could go home. Hiroo did not believe. Not at first. It sounded unreal like dream after fever. But then he saw official papers with seal and signature. He recognized handwriting of commander he once served. Real. Final. Heavy like mountain. He lowered rifle. He unfastened sword. He bowed. Years fell from him like leaves. He walked out of jungle into bright world that never once paused to wait for him. Decades gone. Time stretched so long he could not fit inside it. Yet he lived. Back in present he opened eyes. Fire crackled soft. Forest dark but soft too. Wind moved branches like slow wave. Hiroo felt presence again stronger than mirror. A shape stepped out of memory. Younger version of him stood across fire. Uniform sharp. Eyes fierce. Rifle strapped like limb. Younger Hiroo spoke without voice. Only presence. Only gaze. He asked silent question. Was it worth it? Did loyalty justify loss? Did soldier become prisoner of order he never questioned? Old Hiroo stared back. Flames cast shadows over lines on his face. He breathed steady. He answered without words. Duty carried him. Duty trapped him. Both truth exists. Younger version flickered like flame, then dimmed. But he did not vanish. He waited. Morning came gentle. Hiroo left forest and returned to city. But something inside shifted like branch broken underfoot. He visited museum again. This time longer. This time slower. He studied his photograph taken day he surrendered. A man thin like wire. Eyes sharp like blade. Onoda stood surrounded by soldiers of world he did not trust. Yet he saluted, not from defeat, from duty completed. But image felt strange now, like stranger wearing his face. Evening arrived. He poured tea. Steam curled upward like ghost of jungle mist. He watched cup as if watching dawn rise over Lubang again. He felt old question return like echo through years. If war never ended for him until someone said, so then perhaps peace too required same command. Maybe he waited for order to live. Footsteps sounded outside his door. Slow. Deliberate. Not tourist. Not reporter. Something else. Something long expected. And when door opened, he saw a figure he never imagined standing there. The figure in the doorway was small against the glare of city lights. At first Hiroo thought it was shadow. Then recognition crept like dawn over forest floor. It was a boy. Not young in years. Perhaps 30 or 40. Yet boy in presence. Innocence. Hesitation. Eyes wide like forest after rain. The boy stepped inside quietly. He carried nothing. No camera. No paper. Only gaze that seemed to weigh decades. Hiroo motioned for him to sit. The silence held. Neither spoke immediately. Only the soft hum of city filtered through windows like distant insects. The boy finally spoke, words careful. I am your grandson, he said. I know the story. I know what they say. But I wanted to meet you. Hiroo blinked slowly. Time wavered. His mind carried maps of jungle and patrol. Memories of footprints and distant gunfire. Yet he understood. This was future reaching back. A bridge built of blood and soil and history. He nodded. No rush. No celebration. Only acknowledgement. Duty and past had shaped him into calm river. Grandson was a ripple along that water. They spoke long into night. Hiroo described jungle with all its layers of sound. Every bird, every branch, every moment of fear and patience. The boy listened as if absorbing sunlight. Then he asked quiet question. Did it matter? Did all those years change anything? Hiroo looked at hands. Old. Scars faint. Skin wrinkled. Fingers once tight on rifle now loose around teacup. I do not know, he said. I do not know if duty justified the lives lost or the years stolen. I only know I obeyed. And in obedience I survived. In obedience I lived through time that forgot me. Perhaps that alone is meaning. Days turned into weeks. Hiroo and grandson walked Tokyo streets together. The boy asked about modern war. About airplanes that fly without soldiers inside. About governments that fight from rooms without jungle. Hiroo spoke with slow patience. He explained that war changes not in form but in human mind. Fear, obedience, duty, all persist. Tools shift. Names shift. But shadow of soldier inside man remains. Grandson listened and absorbed. Not judgment, not awe, only awareness. Hiroo visited forest again. Lubang in memory. Dreamed in twilight of moss and leaf. He remembered villagers' faces. Their sorrow. Their resilience. He bowed in apology again. The act felt like ritual now. Healing ritual. Time had passed, but echo remained. Even decades could not erase touch of life taken in blind loyalty. Hiroo understood that peace is not absence of war, but understanding of shadow it leaves behind. He wrote letters now to descendants of those impacted by patrols. Words calm. Apology measured. Admission clear. Nothing grand. Nothing heroic. Only truth. Some letters returned unanswered. Others received with cautious peace. One family sent photograph of garden rebuilt where house once stood. Flowers bright in sun. Children laughing. Hiroo stared at image and felt not loosen. Not gone. But moved. Shifted. Understanding reached through time. Hiroo trained grandchildren in survival. Not for war. Not for empire. Only to see world as it is. To respect earth. To know hunger. To listen to wind. Young minds admired skill. Did not question life lessons. But Hiroo silently counted years lost to patrols. He imagined 30 years slipping past. Lessons learned at cost of age. He told students quietly that duty must bend to reason. That obedience without question is slow imprisonment. That peace is task harder than war because it requires patience beyond fear. In quiet moments he returned to mirror in his apartment. Younger self appeared in reflection. Shadowed figure crouched with rifle. Eyes sharp. Uniform neat. Unmoving. Watching. Waiting. Hiroo smiled faintly. Not mockery. Not sadness. Recognition. Time had carved layers into mind. He and younger self could finally meet. One body, two lives, jungle and city, past and present, breath held. Eyes steady. Flame flickered in memory. Years passed. Hiroo aged further. Steps slower. Eyes softer. Stories still told. Historians sought him. Writers wrote. Yet he remained quiet man shaped by decades lost to obedience. A final understanding settled inside like moss over stone. Life measured not in orders but in moments grasped. Pain acknowledged. Peace created. Shadow remembered but no longer feared. One evening grandson asked about Emperor. Hiroo closed eyes. Whispered. He lives not in throne or palace but in trust we hold for those we serve. City lights outside glimmered like distant stars. Hiroo felt weight lift slightly. Duty completed. Life observed. Past reconciled but not erased. Jungle no longer held him. Yet jungle lived inside him as constant rhythm. Suddenly a knock came at door, not loud, not urgent, but measured, deliberate. Familiar in way memory recognizes before thought. Hiroo rose slowly. Heart steady. Mind alert. Eyes narrowed not in fear, but expectation. He reached door, opened. And there, in frame of doorway, stood figure that belonged neither entirely to past nor future. Something he had not seen before but always sensed. Presence so clear it seemed to occupy room and memory at same time. The figure in the doorway was tall yet calm. Not soldier. Not child. Not stranger. Something between memory and moment. Hiroo felt the air shift like wind moving through pine needles. Years of discipline and decades of waiting converged into stillness. He knew instinctively that this was not ordinary. It was culmination of time, duty, and consequence stepping forward. The figure did not speak. Only gaze met his own, steady, patient, almost like mirror of past self that once crouched in jungle shadow. Hiroo nodded. A greeting. A recognition of presence. Not fear. Not surprise. Only acknowledgement of inevitability. Days that followed blurred like morning mist. The figure stayed nearby, always at distance that respected space, yet reminded Hiroo of its existence. It moved like thought, neither fully visible nor invisible. Sometimes it mirrored him, walking in parks, sitting in quiet apartment, watching grandchildren play in sun. Other times it disappeared completely, leaving silence so heavy it pressed against ribs. Hiroo accepted it as companion, not friend, not enemy. Something beyond definition, part of the years he had lived and the ones lost to obedience. He revisited museums, studied artifacts again, uniforms, rifles, letters, maps. The figure observed silently. It seemed drawn to places that held memory like magnet draws iron. Hiroo felt no judgment, only presence. He spoke softly to students and historians, explained the subtlety of survival, the difference between action and understanding, between obedience and wisdom. How sometimes duty can mislead not because of evil, but because of clarity of purpose misaligned with reality. Presence watched, always. Nights became ritual. Hiroo lit small fire or candle, watched flame like reflection of jungle light. Shadows moved across walls. Figure appeared often in shadows as if part of fire. He thought of villagers. 30 lives lost. Memories returned in whispers, not voices. Hiroo carried remorse as he had carried rifle, balanced like weight in hands. He no longer feared judgment. He accepted it as part of existence. Presence seemed to approve, or maybe merely witness. Hiroo could not tell difference, and he did not care. Grandson learned patience sitting beside Hiroo during these quiet nights, watching flame, listening to slow breaths. Learning history not from books but from man who lived it. Hiroo told stories without dramatics. Names, dates, movements, decisions, choices, mistakes. Young mind absorbed without judgment. Presence lingered. Sometimes reflected in glass. Sometimes in doorway. Always subtle, always steady. Lesson of past shaped into calm rhythm. He returned to Philippines one last time. Walked paths now overgrown but remembered every twist. Saw villagers again, now older. Gardens grown. Children grown. Peace obvious in every detail. Hiroo bowed. Words simple. Apologies spoken once more. Hands shaking slightly in unfamiliar humidity. Fireflies glowed in darkness like tiny stars. Jungle alive yet forgiving. Presence appeared. Watching. Hiroo felt acceptance in weight of air. He understood finally. Letters continued to arrive. Some from families whose fathers died decades earlier. Some from historians. Some from strangers touched by story. Hiroo responded in measured words. Not excuse, not justification. Only truth of living through obedience too long, of surviving beyond command. Of peace discovered late but alive. Letters stacked like steps, leading to understanding of life beyond war. One night he sat beneath tree in Tokyo Park, wind soft against face, moon pale as old steel. He closed eyes, felt jungle pulse through veins, felt city flow over skin. Presence appeared again, closer, clearer. Shape now seemed part of both worlds. He opened eyes. Figure stood beside him. Not threatening, not foreign. Companion of years stitched from shadow of past and reality of present. Hiroo felt calm. Rhythm of jungle inside him matched rhythm of city outside. Grandson approached, hesitant, eyes bright, asked about duty and war. Hiroo spoke slow. Explained difference between living for command and living with conscience. Explained value of patience and memory. Explained that life measured not in obedience alone, but in understanding consequences. Flame from nearby lantern flickered over faces. Shadows moved like thoughts. Presence watched without movement. Hiroo felt weight lift. Not completely, but slightly. Enough to breathe easier. Final days approached. Hiroo continued simple routines. Tea in morning, walk in afternoon, writing letters. Teaching lessons, visiting parks and museums. Studying fire. Observing presence. Grandson always nearby. Presence always nearby. His body aged. Bones slower, eyes softer, yet mind sharp as forest trail. Every movement deliberate. Every thought measured. Every breath acknowledgement of years survived beyond world's end of war. One evening he returned to mirror. Reflection clear but layered. Younger self crouched in bush. Older self standing in city. Presence reflected faintly behind both. Hiroo placed hand on glass. Closed eyes, inhale, exhale. Understood fully that soldier and man can coexist. Past and present converge. Duty becomes memory. Memory becomes wisdom. Flame flickers in room. Shadows bow. Silence speaks loudest. And in that silence, something shifted. Something that had waited decades. Something unseen yet undeniable. Hiroo turned slowly toward window. City lights sparkling. Fireflies from memory dancing. And for first time in decades, he did not search jungle. Did not calculate threat. Did not anticipate orders. Only watched. Only felt, only existed. Then a sound came, not wind, not city, not footsteps of grandson. It was whisper of decision, echo from deep years, calling him back into memory one final time. The whisper came softly at first, not voice, not word. More like vibration through air. Hiroo paused mid-step. Eyes narrowed, heart steady but pulse alert. Decades of jungle instinct awakened again. Not fear, not reflex, awareness. He followed sound to small courtyard behind apartment. Moonlight silvered the ground. Shadows lay in still waves. There was nothing. Yet he knew presence lingered. Not ghost. Not memory. Something between thought and reality. Something that had waited all these years for recognition. Grandson appeared behind him. Hesitant. Watching. Eyes wide with question unasked. Hiroo nodded slowly. Gestured to sit beside him. Silence thick as forest fog. They sat, together, watching moonlight ripple across concrete and moss. Hiroo spoke softly without urgency. Explained that some echoes of duty never fade. That life sometimes stretches beyond comprehension. That presence, whatever form it takes, is acknowledgement of all the moments lived and survived. Grandson listened. No interruption. Only absorption. Breath matching elder's slow rhythm. Later, Hiroo visited museum again. Not for artifacts this time. Only to walk halls that once displayed his rifle and uniform. Glass cases now reflected his image differently. Older man, not soldier. Not hero. Only witness. Observer. Every object reminded him that life carries weight of choices made long before understanding arrives. Presence appeared faintly in reflection. Shadow merging with his own. Hiroo paused in front of rifle. Fingers hovered over glass. Memories of jungle patrol. Rain-soaked uniform. Hunger sharp like blade. Lives taken unintentionally. He bowed slightly. Whispered thanks. Not for survival. Not for glory. Only acknowledgement of existence beyond command. In afternoons he walked parks. Watching children. Listening to laughter. Breathing city air unlike jungle humidity but alive with pulse of life. He explained to grandson that watching peace can be training as rigorous as any jungle survival. Eyes must see. Ears must hear. Heart must understand rhythm of world. Life unfolds not in moments of bravery, but in moments of attention. Presence always close. Sometimes behind tree. Sometimes in doorway. Always steady. Patient. Unjudging. Letters continued. Some old. Some recent. Requests for stories. Requests for wisdom. Hiroo answered slowly. Not to glorify or shame. Only to share calm perspective of man who lived decades beyond orders he never questioned. Each letter folded neatly. Each word chosen with care. Presence seemed pleased. Or maybe simply observing. He could not tell difference. Did not need to. Then one day a photograph arrived. Faded. Torn at edges. Depicted village long abandoned. Children playing. Fields lush and green. Hiroo traced lines with finger. Remembered path he once walked, rifle in hand. Then remembered apology whispered into wind. He felt not loosen. Years stretched long and heavy, now reduced to memory held gently in palm. Presence appeared closer than ever. Standing just beyond light, waiting without urging, watching without demand. Evening approached. Hiroo brewed tea. Cup warm. Steam rising in gentle spirals. Moon bright outside window. He watched flame flicker. Shadows danced across walls like ghosts of patrols and orders. Grandson seated nearby, silent. They shared same space without words. Understanding passed like river from mind to mind. Presence hovered faintly, shape indistinct but weight undeniable. Hiroo felt time stretching backward and forward. Decades of jungle and city, obedience and understanding, loss and survival converged in this room. Night deepened. Hiroo closed eyes. Listened to distant hum of city, wind brushing leaves outside. He recalled surrender day. Rifle lowered, sword handed over, salute performed. Command finally received though decades late. World moved without him. He moved within world, memory solid as stone. Responsibility carried like slow drumbeat through body. All years converged here, present, quiet, observed. A final realization came like soft rain. Not about duty, not about war. Not about obedience or survival. About life itself. How fleeting, how fragile, How connected through actions and presence. How understanding arrives late but reshapes everything. Hiroo opened eyes. Presence closer. Almost tangible. Almost solid. Breath mingling with his own. He no longer felt need to patrol. No need to calculate threat. Only to exist. Only to witness. Then sound. Soft. Subtle. Outside window. Not city. Not wind. Not animal. Something deliberate. Measured. Known. Hiroo rose slowly. Grandson followed quietly. They approached window together. Outside, beyond light and shadow, a movement. Something that belonged neither to past nor present. Shape and motion combined into presence unmistakable, recognition immediate. This was conclusion. Something awaited him that had waited decades. Hiroo inhaled slow. Exhaled slower. Stepped forward. Door opened silently. Outside, figure visible now in moonlight. Clearer, commanding attention without demand. Hiroo felt pulse of years condensed into single moment. Step taken. Breath held, understanding ready. Presence awaited acknowledgement that would close circle of long decades. The figure outside was unmistakable now. Neither soldier nor stranger. It seemed almost sculpted from memory itself. Shape tall and deliberate. Movement calm. Presence undeniable. Hiroo stepped forward slowly, grandson close behind. No fear, no hesitation. Only awareness sharpened by decades of jungle, years of patience and lifetime of observation. Moonlight caught edges of figure, casting shadows that merged with light across the courtyard. Silence filled space thick as jungle fog. Breath slowed naturally, all else fell away. Hiroo studied figure carefully. Then recognition struck. Not human. Not entirely. More like culmination of everything he had lived, survived, and remembered. Jungle and city, obedience and consequence, life measured in decades rather than days. Presence was witness and conclusion in one. It had waited not to punish, not to reward, but simply to exist as balance to years he had lived beyond command. He nodded slowly, stepped forward. Figure did not move. It did not need to. It existed as natural force now, as quiet acknowledgement of all that had passed. They stood together. Time seemed suspended. Past decades stretched backward and forward. Surrender in jungle. Years alone in forest. First moments back in Tokyo. Grandson growing beside him. Letters written and answered. Apologies whispered to wind. Fire lit in rooms of memory. Museum halls walked countless times. Every act converged in this courtyard in silence. Presence did not judge. Only held weight of existence. Hiroo felt deep peace he had never known in the years of patrol, of orders, of survival. He turned slowly, grandson beside him. Young man's eyes wide but steady. Hiroo smiled faintly, words unnecessary. All lessons conveyed through posture, breath, and attention. Step by step he approached figure. Moonlight brushing face. Decades of jungle instinct still alive but softened. Not soldier now, not warrior. Only man shaped by time and memory and understanding. Figure remained still. No sound, no motion. Only acknowledgement. Hiroo remembered surrender again. Rifle lowered, sword handed over, salute performed. The moment stretched decades in his mind. Now conclusion stood before him. He understood clearly that obedience had extended far beyond war. That survival carried responsibility and consequence in equal measure. That life measured not in orders followed, but in awareness of impact. He felt knot inside loosen. Years of tension carried in muscles and mind reduced to calm understanding. Presence did not vanish. It remained steady as rock and river. Then figure shifted slightly. Almost imperceptible. A breeze of movement. Hiroo took step closer. Breath slow and deliberate. Grandson mirrored him. Presence now tangible in shape and weight. Years of duty and patience distilled into single recognition. Hiroo raised hand. Gesture slow and precise. Not greeting, not challenge. Only acknowledgement. Presence responded with subtle movement. Recognition complete. Balance restored. Time of waiting over. Night deepened. Stars faint through clouds. Light from city reflected soft on concrete. Hiroo remained outside, beside figure, grandson close. Silence profound. Yet not empty, filled with understanding of all years past. Life and death, obedience and consequence, memory and awareness. presence complete yet intangible. Hiroo no longer needed to measure threat, to calculate survival, to obey orders unseen, only to exist fully, deeply, calmly. He spoke finally, voice soft, not loud, not commanding. I have lived through what was demanded and what was withheld. I have survived beyond expectation. I have returned. I have learned. I have understood. Words carried slowly over night air. Figure remained still. Grandson listening. Hiroo felt weight of decades settle into chest like stone finally resting after long journey. Flame of patience burning low but steady, then sound came faint. Not human, not wind, not city, pattern deliberate. Familiar without recognition. Hiroo stiffened slightly. Presence shifted subtly. Grandson close, attentive. The sound repeated, rhythm steady. Almost like heartbeat of world. Hiroo felt pulse of years respond. Memory of jungle alert. Survival instinct tuned sharp, yet mind calm. Breath measured. He understood immediately that this was culmination of all that remained unresolved. That final piece of past sought acknowledgement. Hiroo took slow step toward sound. Grandson beside him, presence gliding faintly along edges of awareness. Shadows shifted. Moonlight traced contours of courtyard and trees beyond. The world held breath. Decades of waiting, obedience, survival, and consequence converged into single point. Hiroo felt entire life distilled, all lessons, all mistakes, all victories unnoticed, all sorrow carried, all understanding achieved, presence now aligned with him. He reached out hand slowly, not to touch, not to command, only to acknowledge. Sound ceased, shadows stilled, moonlight softened. Silence heavy yet gentle, Hiroo exhaled deeply. Breath of jungle, city war, and peace all in one. Grandson watched, understanding without question. Presence shifted subtly, recognition completed. Circle closed. Years of obedience, survival, and life finally reconciled. Hiroo felt for first time complete release. Morning arrived quietly, not with fanfare or alarm. Sun lifted gently over city rooftops. Light filtered soft through blinds. Hiroo sat on balcony, grandson beside him. Presence no longer visible in form. Only weight of it lingered, subtle as shadow behind thoughts. Years of jungle, obedience, survival, and reflection settled into rhythm of breath. Hiroo felt flow of life without urgency. Finally unbound from duty and expectation that had shaped him for decades. He looked at grandson. Young man now steady in posture and gaze. Understanding present not in words but in shared silence. Hiroo spoke softly. Life does not end when orders cease. Life continues when awareness begins. Obedience fades. Understanding remains. Grandson nodded. Eyes absorbing. Mind quiet but alive. Presence had taught lessons beyond what words could convey. Hiroo realized all he had done, all he had survived, was preparation for this calm moment of comprehension. City stirred below. Cars hummed distant. Voices faint through walls. Yet Hiroo felt connection to distant past. Jungle footsteps, rifle clutched, patrols measured in days and months and years, lives affected, apologies whispered. Every act remained within him. Not as guilt alone, but as awareness. Duty and life intertwined in complex rhythm. Now simplified, understanding held steady, past reconciled. Shadow of soldier softened into human shape. He returned to letters, read slowly, replied slowly. Not for recognition, not for history. Only to communicate calm truth of survival beyond war. Lessons of obedience balanced by reflection. Mistakes admitted without flourish. Apologies offered without expectation. Recipients responded variably. Some letters unanswered. Others met with cautious peace. Hiroo observed each carefully, noting how passage of time heals or reshapes lives in ways unseen. Presence no longer visible but sensed in every measured action. Visits to museums continued, artifacts viewed with quiet care. Rifles, swords, uniforms, letters, photographs. He understood now not as soldier but as observer of history's sweep. Presence would appear faintly in reflection sometimes. Not as ghost, but as subtle acknowledgement. Life extended beyond orders into comprehension. Hiroo explained to visitors and students the difference between surviving and understanding. Young people listened. They absorbed lessons not as admonition but as calm awareness of world and human nature. He revisited Philippines one last time. Walked paths overgrown, gardens thriving where houses once stood. Villagers older, children grown, peace evident, apologies spoken softly. Hands trembling slightly from age and humidity. Memories of rifle and patrol returned not as burden but as reference. Lessons of patience, observation, and consequence carried forward. Presence felt faintly nearby. Recognition silent yet complete. Years of obedience reconciled an act of acknowledgement. Evenings filled with slow routines. Tea, walks, teaching, writing, observation of fire, watching grandchildren play. Breathing city air with awareness born from decades in jungle. Shadows stretched across walls. Light flickered softly, presence always near, not intrusive, not demanding. Only companion of calm understanding. Hiroo felt finally that life measured not by obedience but by reflection and awareness. Duty completed long ago. Understanding permanent. One evening, final chapter seemed to approach. Hiroo sat beneath a tree in quiet park. Moon high. City light soft. Breath slow. Presence felt not as figure but as weight of decades. Observation of all choices. Acknowledgement of survival beyond orders. He closed eyes, exhaled slowly. Memory of jungle patrols returned. Rifle lowered. Sword surrendered. Salute performed. Years collapsed into single point of comprehension. Past and present merged. Future yet unknown. He opened eyes. Grandson seated nearby. Watching quietly, Hiroo smiled faintly, words soft. We live not for orders, not for recognition, not for duty alone. We live to understand the consequences of our actions and to carry peace forward. Grandson nodded, understanding full. Presence no longer felt as distinct figure. Only calm resonance remaining in air and mind. Hiroo felt weight of decades release. Life distilled into essence of quiet awareness. Sun rose gradually. Light warmed face, breath even. Heart steady. Hiroo Onoda, soldier of war long ended, guardian of memory. Man who obeyed without pause and survived beyond expectation, felt time settle like river into stone. Jungle still alive in mind. City alive in body. Life finally reconciled. Peace achieved not by surrender alone, but by understanding, reflection, and acceptance. He rose slowly, hand on grandson's shoulder, and stepped forward into day with decades of shadow finally balanced and held gently in calm presence of living. In a world that moved forward without him, one man kept fighting a war that had already ended. This is the haunting journey of Hiroo Onoda, the Japanese soldier who vanished into the Philippine jungle and refused to surrender for almost 3 decades. Guided by orders he believed were unbreakable and a loyalty carved deep into his soul. He survived on instinct, fear, and faith long after his empire had fallen. His story is not just about war. It is about the weight of duty, the cost of belief, and the heartbreaking moment when a man steps out of the shadows and discovers that time, home, and history have moved on without him. If you want more emotional, haunting, and unforgettable true stories told in calm bedtime style, make sure you subscribe to Stories Before Sleep. Like the video. Share it with someone who loves deep human stories. And let your nights begin with the world's most powerful tales.